American way, and we built this country called the USA, and we fly our flag cause we're proud and free, we're Americans. Red, white, and blue is our way of life. Never back down from a challenge or a fight. Nature provides, God gives the rights, we're Americans. We make up America, it's amazing America. Oh, yeah.
Hey everybody, this is Sergeant Frank on the Sergeant Frank Show, and tonight's guest is none other than Nancy Kachurik, our brand new family support ambassador. And we also have, with great delight, the bird dog.
I don't know. I don't think I can live up to that name that Nancy has. That was awesome.
I can live up to ambassador.
So tonight we're going to discuss how it's to be, how a mother, wife of an officer, when a situation happens and you're at home or you hear about a situation that's fairly scary where deadly force was used as an attack on our law enforcement officers. And Nancy, I know that in Clearwater we had a situation. Can you share with our listeners what exactly happened in Clearwater?
I can, from, everything that was released, about, I'd say 2:00 in the morning, 2:30 the morning after Christmas, our officers answered a call to check on somebody, like a welfare check. And as they approached the house, on the back side of the house, it was a business on the front side, a house on the back side. As they were taking the female that was in there that had asked for assistance, I don't know all the details on that. The officers that were assisting in the back came under fire. There was 4 or 5 officers back there who came under fire. And about that time, the suspect, they thought at the time, I think, that he had thrown some type of device to, keep them from being able to see. Ended up, I believe, that he had shot a fire extinguisher, but all the smoke came out. And at that time, he began shooting out the front of the business. And we had officers who were, out front as well. We had 2 of our canine and another officer who were parked out front who came under fire as well. And this suspect shot out the windows. He jumped through the windows. He ran out as they were covered behind their vehicles, attempted to shoot an officer as he passed, and thank God his gun jammed. And at that time, our officers returned fire and shot and killed the suspect in the middle of the highway, because it was, it was a storefront.
What kind of weapon was he using? Was it a handgun, a rifle?
It was, from what I understand, it was either like a Mac 10 or Mac 11 style weapon is what he was shooting.
Okay. So
And
do they think that he planned that, or did he just find out the police were there and freak out and start shooting, or do you know?
No, he planned it. From what I understand, from what has been released, is he said that, I don't know what happened between him and, the female that were inside the house, but I know that he said that she was going to die, that he was going to die, that when the police came, that they were going to die, everybody was going to die. Okay. And so they considered themselves, that it was an ambush.
So the officers hearing that information would probably be on a higher alert, because Welfare checks are very common in law enforcement, and not
Right.
always would they turn out like that, obviously, but you
Right.
always have to be on
They had
alert.
no idea. Yeah. I mean, they had no idea when they came in and she's standing there. They had no idea that he was back there behind her. Um, they were able to remove her out of the home, and that's when they came under fire. One of the sergeants had taken a step back. You can see it in the video. He steps back one step, and as this person started firing, um, he took at least 3, possibly 4 rounds through his pant leg. Not one bullet touched his flesh, and one
You talking about the
round,
sergeant?
the sergeant, yes,
Okay,
and
okay.
one round was lodged in his uh, the new pair of boots. He had just gotten a pair of Kevlar boots, and the round was lodged into his boot. He thought he was hit at the time, but thank God he wasn't. But they weren't able to return fire because of it was such uh, that they were here. They are assisting this girl, and that's when this guy steps out and opens fire on all of them. So they're trying to take cover, and you can see as he stepped back that had he not taken that one step back, it's one of those things you don't even want to think about, really.
Exactly.
Do you think the girl was involved or was part of this attack or had an idea what was going to happen?
I really don't know. I don't know if anybody well, I know that the investigators know, but that information, obviously I'm not privy to, and but everybody is asked that. It'll be interesting when it, all comes out as to whether she knew. Um, I believe that she, you know, at some point was a victim as well to this person. Um,
It
but
sounds like the suspect he knew what he was going to do when the police, arrived.
absolutely, that's what she said, is that he said that everybody was going to die.
So the fact that she said that kind of, like you said, I'm sure it'll all come out, but it sounds a little bit like maybe she knew what was going on.
Yeah,
I hope that that's uncovered. So I when you watch the video, it's great that you can explain it a little bit to us because it's hard to really see what's happening in the
right,
video. And we're gonna attach that link onto the show so you can actually see it. But
right.
it's a little bit tough to see what's happening there during the, the gunfire.
It's extremely difficult. I debated whether to even watch it um, because, I know all these guys and very well. And it, the whole thing, when we woke up that next morning and the phone was ringing and, we were getting calls as to, wanting to know information and, giving us information as to what had happened. Um, it just makes you sick. And so when that video came out, after having felt the emotions, even though my husband was not involved in it, uh, I had to really question whether I wanted to watch it or not. But I was glad I did.
Was he home at that night with you?
He was at home.
Okay, so he wasn't working.
No, he wasn't.
Okay.
He was off. He got off at I think about 11 o'clock that night. So that was Christmas. It would have been Christmas night that he got off, and it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning.
So you were saying that all these officers obviously because of the work that you do with the family support program that you do in the police department. So do you think that you have a little more emotional connection with the officers because you do that work with them and in your program? Is that part of the lesson that you kind of start preparing the significant others, the wives, the family members of what these officers are going to experience when they get on the road?
Yeah, it's kind of twofold on that. We had veteran officers that were there. The one sergeant in the back. He has been on for probably 20 years, and I've known him. You know, uh, my husband's worked with him that long, and then we had two of our canine officers were there, and one of the canine officers we had just seen that night. It was Christmas night, and we took two of our grandchildren. We met um, the grandkids, and I met my husband up at the police station because we wanted to take cookies up to the comm center, and just not to forget them for Christmas. And so we took them up there, and one of the canine sergeant was there, and he I'm not sure if he was just going on duty, but he was down in his office, and he took the grandkids out back and introduced them to his dog. And and here, just probably 4 to 6 hours later, he's in the fight for his life. So we have the veteran officers that were there, and two of the officers were, you know, new, uh, out of field training. And so they went through, we've been doing our program for about 2.5 years, where we welcome the families, and we work with the families while their officers go through field training. We develop relationships with them. And two of the officers that were involved in that were officers that, I helped welcome, and they weren't on the road that long on their own. And so when you see those two names pop up, it, you know, it was tough. And it was tough with all of them, but it was real difficult with that. But on the other hand, when you are able to connect with the family members from the very beginning, and you have that relationship with them, you're able to meet their needs when these incidents happen, and you're able to, support them.
All right. So with these new officers and being exposed to a shooting situation that they experienced, at what point does the family, do they contact you about questions? I mean, I know there's some sensitive information that they really can't reveal either, but just the emotional side of it, how do you deal with the parts of that where they're upset and they're scared for their loved one? They're not sure if, do they get where they're like, not sure if they want, them to keep continuing that career? What was the effect of that I mean, can you share a little bit of that? Like, what do you
Yeah,
do to kind of reassure them that, all the safeguards have been taken to keep their loved ones safe on the job?
one of the things that I talk to the families about, when to when you're introducing them to the department, and you're introducing them to, a lot of them are brand new into law enforcement. One of the last groups we had, the majority of them had just graduated from the academy. So you're talking to moms, and you're talking to dads, and you're talking to brothers and sisters and wives, and and you're explaining to them how dangerous this job is, but yet you also tell them that they are going to have the best training there is, that they're never alone, that, you know, the other officers are always going to have their back, and that whenever there's an incident that occurs, that they will be a show of force. And I make that promise to them because I know our department, and I know that that's how it functions. And so when this happened, and you you watch the video, even you can see that that's exactly what happened in this setting, and that their training uh, came in, that each one had each other's back, that they were able to survive the incident, and that they were a show of force in this. And so to be able to comfort them in the way of saying, this is what we talked to you about from the beginning. And I understand that we're not, there's always a chance that we can lose an officer. And you don't ever want to think about that. But the, I can, uh, I know that making that promise or making that, um, explaining that to them allows them the comfort of knowing that they can send them out there. And so when this happens in this setting, I can't go into the things that we talk about or the things that are said. Everybody deals with it differently. Some people say they're okay. Some people want to talk. But the best thing to do is to come together and support each other. And that's exactly, how uh, we function at our department.
So when your
And
husband's at work, have you ever
mhm.
gotten? You said he's been there over 20 years. Have you ever gotten any texts or phone calls from him about incidents, and he's saying, "I'm safe. It's not me," or anything like that?
Oh, I can't even count. He's been there almost 30 years.
Oh, almost 30.
So,
Awesome.
yeah, um, there have been that's one of the things that we have is we don't have rules on how we function in this household, never have, even when the kids were growing up. But we have agreements. Um, and that is if something happens, and this is one of the things I tell the recruits, is that you have agreements with your spouse. If you're not married, you have agreements with your parents that when something happens, that you send a text, you pick up the phone, you're going to see this on TV, you're going to see something happening, I'm okay, or I'm not involved. Um,
Right.
and and that's all you need to do, and that you'll see them when you get home. And I've received, I can't even count how many times that's happened, or that he's been involved in something but he's okay. you
Right.
know there's been many of those as well.
Exactly. So over the years, like when he first started, as were you with him when he actually got hired?
No, not
Okay.
right when he got hired.
Okay. So when you married him or got involved with him, the worry factor, I'm sure, when you were, in the early stages of your relationship, was probably a lot more than it is now. I mean, I know everybody worries about their loved ones, but what I guess the question I'm trying to ask you is it any do you worry less now than you did before?
Sometimes I think that I don't worry as much, um, but
You feel a little bit
things
more
like what
confident these
happened,
days?
yeah, it- you know, I think sometimes you get comfortable.
Right.
And then when these things happen, it's a huge reminder. And you get reminders almost every day when you read, what happens in law enforcement with our officers. But I think that your experience as a veteran wife allows you that you've navigated this life and you've learned how to adjust to, when he walks out that door and you say, be careful. That's the same thing I've said to him from day one. And it's, be careful. I love you. Be careful. Um,
Yeah,
and
I used to tell my wife, if you get phone calls from the police department or any of my friends or any other officers, then things are going to be okay. If you get a knock on the door, that's when it's not good.
right. Yeah. Everybody dreads that. And
Right.
I don't, I, I can guarantee you there's not one police wife or husband, any spouse that has not uh, run that scenario through their head and how they would react and how they would respond. And it's probably completely opposite of how you would respond. maybe it's close to it, but because we just don't know and we don't want to find out. But we've all run that scenario through our head. But I think the experience of the years that I've had, because it's been close to 30 myself, is that you you learn to deal with it. You learn to place, when you have those fears, you learn to place those fears aside and keep busy or help other people um, and
That was a question I was going to ask you. By helping the other officers' families and stuff, does that help you?
absolutely. Because when we first started in this life, and I mean it's a different life, and it's stressful, but it's you guys know it's a life that you're very proud of, but the worry that comes along with it can be very stressful. But I think with experience over time, you learn to trust that everything is going to be okay, and that if it's not okay, that you can handle it because of the experience that you have and the people that and that the department, the people that are going to have your back should anything happen. And, everybody deals with it in different ways. For me, I place my total faith and trust in God. Um, I tell myself every time he walks out that door, I love him so much, but God loves him way more than I love him. And so I know that he's going to take care of him and he's going to watch over him. And that should anything happen, that he already knows what his plans are. And so I just have to place my faith in God, and to send my husband out there with the confidence that God is going to watch over him and take care of him. And I think having that, I mean, everybody, no, not everybody has the same faith, but to be able to place your fears in something like that, and for me, like I said, is my faith in God, is absolutely the best way to be able to deal with it. You know, I want nothing more than my home to be a refuge for him, and for it to be a place of feeling safe and secure. Um, and when he comes home, I feel the same way. And so when he leaves and I place my trust in God that he's going to keep him safe, and when he comes home, that gives me that reassurance that, you know, we're doing the right thing.
Well, I think it's great that you prepare these new officers and their spouses and their family members of what could happen. And I think that's the best course of action, because it's a lot easier to prepare for something, before it happens than after or during the event. So I think that gives
Absolutely.
probably a lot of confidence to those officers and their families to probably not worry as much, or to know what to do in a situation. So I think that's a really great thing that you guys do for your department.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to be able to talk to new wives and tell them, you know, that we all worry and we all have that. Sometimes you'll get a sudden fear that something's wrong, or you just constantly worry. You fall asleep with the phone. None of us go to bed without our phone next to us at night. But you also have to understand that it can consume you, and doing that, you'll suffer. Your marriage will suffer, your family's going to suffer, and it can cause his career to suffer if you allow that to overtake um, all of your emotions when they're at work. You can't let that happen. And so we work with the families and give them ways that they can deal with that stress and that worry when it comes.
How important is it to communicate once the person gets home from work to talk about their day at work or a specific incident?
I think it's huge because, listen, so they come home really late, and it could be if he doesn't get home till 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, or if he comes home even at 11. You talk, but you don't talk a whole lot because of the time and they're exhausted and tired. But it's important to have some words. And when the stress becomes heavy at work, I think it's important for you to talk with your spouse about it. You don't have to tell them everything. And, I tell the spouses, if he's not telling you everything, he's protecting your heart. But I think it's important that you do discuss things, because when you have critical incidents that happen, or you just have the daily work that is getting to be too much, stuffing that down, it's going to come out at some point. And it's not healthy for your relationships. It's not healthy, in your friendships. If you're not married, it's not healthy for your parents. It's not healthy for your marriage. And so I think it's real important that you do talk. But at the same time, I think the officer's pretty smart in uh, protecting his spouse's heart and knowing how much that he needs to talk about.
Do you teach them how to listen?
To teach the spouses how to listen,
Mm-hmm.
we do talk about that. About
Not to be
listening to what.
judgmental, not to be critical, not to, certain things that, because the officer, whether it's a male or a female, needs to feel, like you said before, it should be a safe place when you get home. And no matter what happens, they should be able to say, listen, this is what happened. I can't tell you everything, but this is the way I feel. You don't need to know the facts, but they can get the human side of it, the emotional side of it, and share that so they can get that support from the other person.
Yeah, and we do talk about that, where we tell them to, when they come in, you know, from work, when they're ready to talk to you, to sit down and find that time between the two of you to be able to sit and talk and to listen to what they have to say. And, on the same hand, I tell our recruits, and I even talk to some of our officers when I, have discussions with them when we talk on the phone, and I'll say, it's real important for you to listen to her as well, or to listen to him as well, um, on how their day went and how their night went. But I think it's real, you know, it's it's important for us to remember when they go out the door. Um, there's so many times that you want to say, wait, don't go, whether you just don't have a good feeling about it, or you just, you don't want them to go because you're just worried, and you want to say, hey, stop, I don't want you to go. That you have to just, reel that in, and you can't say those words to them because they cannot take that stress to work with them. And, the last thing that an officer needs is to be on duty and worried about his significant other at home being stressed out and worried as well, because that's double the stress on him or her. But when they come home, it's real important to be able to sit and listen and talk. I think communication is a huge key in this career, knowing how much to talk about and when to talk about. but listening is huge.
Well, Bird Dog, what did you kind of do with your spouse over the years when you were in law enforcement? It sounded like you guys kind of you had a plan. Did you guys talk about work a lot? Did
Yeah, she
you?
used to get upset because when I first started, I was with her when I first started. So when I first started, of course, I was super excited, and everything that happened, I could sit down for hours and just tell her about everything. And as the years go by, it's like gets shorter and shorter, and every now and again
Mhm.
she'd be like, "Well, you didn't tell me what happened." I was like, "Yeah, I did." She goes, "Well, you used to tell me all these details, and you just come home and go, ah, 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 ah," and that's it." you know, so the longer you go, I guess the more you forget that the spouse wants to hear and wants to support what went on and hear what you're thinking and all that kind of good stuff. So I had to like remind myself that somebody she doesn't know what really happened. So and of course
Right.
I did leave some details out. You don't want to tell her that you got there was a shooting and you were like real close, or you got in it. Well, I mean, when you get in a shooting, you have to tell her because you get to sit at home for a while. you know, you can't say, I'm grounded." So I
Right.
mean, but when I got involved in shootings, I always texted my wife and my mother and let them know, I'm involved in this. I'm not hurt, or I'm, hurt a little bit, but it's gonna be okay. And so if you see it on the news, because the news, they have, they have a great way of like showing up and just filming everybody and saying that officers involved and this and that, and they don't think about the family members that are watching that are thinking, "Oh my God, is that my husband? Is that my son?" You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So you get
Yes.
that's why I asked you that question, because it's very important, and I did it. And a lot of times they're like, "Hey, don't call anybody, don't do anything," and I'm like, "Listen, I don't care what you say. I'm texting my wife and I'm texting my mother." So I would always text them and let them know that I was okay. I was involved, but I was okay. So, or I was injured and I was okay. I was gonna be all right.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we explain is that, I tell the recruits, you know, no matter what's going on, you send a text, I'm okay, call. When things happen, if there's an officer involved accident, to make sure that you call your spouse and tell them, say, it's not me, I'm fine.
Yeah. So the point of that is like when I first was hired, I'd come home and yeah, I had this traffic stop. It was this such and such color car. There was three people in it. I walked up, I smelled marijuana. So they lied to me. I tell them the whole story. I found it. I ended up arresting this person. They said this, they said that. We went back to the station. I had to do all this paperwork, and then it gets to where I got a marijuana arrest today, or I did this today, or I'm just using marijuana as a example because there's a lot of that. but
Right.
but yeah, she was like, well, you used to tell me these stories in great detail, and now it's just like real quick, and it's like sometimes I'd be like, yeah, I just don't really want to talk about it. It's just another day to me.
Yeah,
So
after a while, after
right, so
a
so
long time.
for the veteran officers, you gotta. I can look at it now and think about it now that I'm retired, but that I should have done it a little better for my family.
Right. It makes me think when you said that, how at the beginning, it was like that. And me being a nurse, I wanted to hear all the details, no matter, if there was something, you know, most people wouldn't be able to handle listening to, I wanted to hear everything. And I would find myself saying, he would start telling me a story, and I'd say, wait, 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 back up and want a little more detail with that. And, so you kind of find your way of saying, okay, wait, let me let him tell this. And then if he's open to questions afterwards, then I'll let him, I'll ask him questions. But after all this time, he's a sergeant, and he always has a young squad. He'll have a few veteran officers on his squad, but the majority of the time he has young guys. Sometimes he'll have, 6 or 7 of the guys on his squad will have less than 6 or 7 years experience and combined experience.
Right.
And now, as since we started this program, and we've been doing it for, 2.5 years probably. And so I know all the recruits as they're coming through, and I want to know what's happening with them. I know where they're what shift they're on as they're going through field training. I know where they go to when they get assigned to a squad. I stay, uh, in touch and find out how things are going. I stay in touch with the wives. But my husband will always get new recruits on his squad. And now when he comes home, it's not, and this was like this before we did it too. It's not about what he did. He comes home to tell me what his guys did. And especially now that we have, I have an interest in how these guys are doing, whether I
Of
want
course,
to,
because they're out there backing him up.
yeah. And, he came home last night to tell me, about this. It was him and one of the newer officers and how they handled a situation together. And, how he hands the reins over to these young officers, but he steps back and he's always watching and listening and guiding them. And to hear those stories I think has become more exciting for him in this part of his career than telling me about the things that he did. Um, we like to celebrate their victories, and to be there when, times get tough as well. But it's funny, that it was always about what he did. And now it's about what his guys are doing and how proud he is of them. And now I call them my kids or my guys too. And so when they're on his squad and he comes home and tells me, it's kind of like we both feel like proud parents.
It's good that he does that, and he lets them know when they're doing good jobs, because
Oh,
even
yes.
even as a police officer, you say, "Oh, I don't need any kudos. This is my job. I'm not a hero. I'm not this. I'm not that." It still goes a long way when one of your bosses or even your fellow officers tell you, "Hey, great job today. You did a really good job." That
Yeah.
goes a ton.
I think that, yeah, and I also think that helps build that camaraderie that we've seen decline over all these years. So having that support, that close support between the sergeant, the officers, and even you, Nancy, I think adds to that, because now they know there's another person who cares about them and appreciates everything they do.
Yeah, I usually send them, I'll hear if I hear something from another sergeant or, from their spouse or from Mike, he'll hear things, just by word of mouth, that something that they've done. I always send them a little email and tell them I'm proud of them. Um, and then I'll send their spouse, we've had several receive awards that are coming up, and it's so great to see that it's this whole new generation and they're doing so amazing. And to be able to celebrate that with them and celebrate it with their families, and it's just bringing everybody together. It really does do work on the camaraderie, as you said, Frank.
And they need that, because there's an all-out war on cops.
Yeah, there really is. And I think as because of that all out war, and all of us at home knowing that, when you can within your department uh, have this type of support system where you are constantly reminding them or their spouses, that we're here for you, or, hey, this is great, he did a great job, or whatever it is, that when you're building that bond within your department, when bad things happen, it you are a much tighter family, like what we just experienced. Um, it we've seen just how tight we are as a family at Clearwater.
Well, I think that's really great. And I think on future episodes, maybe you can bring part of your training to the show and talk about, maybe like a checklist or some of the things that you guys do, just goes down the line so that other agencies and other departments can take that information back to their departments and say, listen, this is working here. Maybe we could give it a try and see if it'll work in our agencies because, like the bird dog just said, it's an all out war. It's a media blitz. It's all these negative things on social media and the music and the movies. And I mean, I guarantee you there's a lot more negative than positive things about our law enforcement officers today than ever before. And the majority of that's not true. It sells tickets, but it's not selling the profession in a very positive light. And if we're going to recruit people to replace your husband on the job or ourselves, replace us from where we retired, we need to change the perception of law enforcement so we can put the United back in the United States and protect our citizens to the highest degree.
Absolutely. I think it is my goal. I would love to see departments everywhere adopt some type of program. And I know a lot of them do have family support networks, but it would make me extremely happy to see that, because I think when you do that and you equip your officers with the tools to build stronger home lives, I'm trying to think of how I want to put that. When a department comes together and they work with the family and the officers and they equip them to have a strong family life, that those officers bring that to work and it makes them better officers when their home life is secure. And I think that in this type of profession, that it's absolutely necessary that we surround this new generation and lead them into the future and through their careers of being supporting their families. And it would just be amazing if all departments would adopt some type of program to be able to accomplish that.
Well, I think with the help of your program, as we move forward across the country and across Florida with our mentoring program in the schools and everything we do because we've actually opened up our nonprofit to other situations as well. So we're also supporting fallen officers' families. We're also in the schools. We're also taking kids and officers outdoors. So we have a lot on our plate, but I think with the right people like you, Nancy, and the other amazing people that make Adopt a Cop what it is, we can do a better job of bringing our families together, bringing our officers together, because even at work, just like you said, if you have a strong family at home, you're going to have a stronger family at work. And that's really important, especially in these times.
Absolutely.
So Bird Dog, what do you want to say to wrap this up as far as what we're doing with our podcast, with our outdoor programs, and with your amazing ability to produce for the Adopt a Cop program?
Yeah, I'm going to edit this part out. Just kidding.
No, he's not.
No, I just want to, it was a great time talking to you, Nancy, and this was important to talk about, I think, and a lot of people can relate to it. I want to make sure that everybody knows, who we are, and where they can find us. So do you want to tell them about all our social media sites and what they need to do as far as subscribing and liking and all that good stuff?
Well, if you want to hear us on our YouTube channel, you go to Adopt a Cop USA official site, which is also the same as our Facebook. To find our website, it's myaacusa.org.
Now that was awesome. Why did you have to do it in a radio voice? Because
I love doing the radio voice. Because you get so mad when I do it that way.
Oh, I don't get mad. I just think it's funny. It's like we're sitting here talking, having a normal conversation. And it's like, and so.
Well, you know what? It breaks it up, so people are like, wait a minute, something different's happening. Because they might be about falling asleep listening to my monotone voice. So
that's true.
Changing it should help.
Good point. So that's
I
great.
know when Nancy gets tired, she'll put on one of my shows to help her get to sleep sometimes.
Yeah, listens to them in her sleep. Yeah, I listen to it so I can fall asleep.
Exactly.
Kind of
But
like
Nancy,
my granddaughter's got white noise going on in the next room on the thing, so she could sleep better.
Really?
I could do that.
Yeah, rain is the best thing to put me to sleep. I could sleep forever.
Well, we're coming out with our Adopt a Cop video of rain to help people go to sleep, and I don't know if Danny's watched it yet, but it's pretty funny. It's about an hour long.
I have them. I can do an audio file with just the rain.
I think it was. Well, I wish. No, it's not metal, but it is a beautiful. It sounds great. Mother Nature and God really worked with me on that one. But Nancy, thank you again so much. You bring so much to our program. You bring so much to our listeners, and the information that you're sharing and the work that you're doing is so vitally important for our citizens, for our police officers, and people looking at this profession to get involved in it can be, they can know that it's not what you see on TV. It's the real police officers, the real departments do have situations and support like the program that you're bringing to different agencies all over. Because I know that a lot of people are watching you and watching what you're doing and using some of your techniques and stuff that you've learned over the years to help their agencies cope with things and prevent some of the tragedies that are happening in our law enforcement families. So thank you so much for taking time. I know you got sleeping grandbabies around you, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to help us out with getting the word out there to the masses.
You're so welcome.
And Bird Dog, again, for everything that you do. I know you're under the weather, and we're not going to talk about what you're doing with toilet paper these days. But again, I really appreciate everything that you do. And and Danny doesn't talk about it. The Bird Dog doesn't talk about it, but he is a huge part of the Adopt a Cop program. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know where we would be. He saved us from some evildoers, and the work that he does with our videos and our radio show is just tremendous. So a big shout out to you and a big thank you, because we couldn't do it without you, brother.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, kids. Well, I know we have to get up early tomorrow and cut the grass and work in our gardens and all the stuff that we do on Saturdays. But I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedule to be on the Sergeant Frank Show, because it is really important for our future of our country. So thank you guys so much.
You're so welcome.
You're welcome.
Have a good night.
Thanks for joining us again on the Sergeant Frank Show, and help us put the United back in the United States so we can continue casting hope and catching dreams for the future of our children.
Signal 33 shooting, 100 block East MLK, 100 block East MLK. All units 1051. Getting an update, we have a 10-year-old male lying on the ground with a gunshot wound, unknown exactly where, unable to verify breathing. Delta 14, 1048.
Listen, young one, it's not cool to be a thug. There is nothing good about going selling drugs. The money don't mean nothing when you're harming everyone, and you can get killed bringing pain to your mom. Take a legal substance and you can OD. Overdose from nasty chemicals in the streets. Live a happy life, you gotta keep your hands clean, and most importantly, think about your family.